I'm gonna grab his gaze, and then I'm gonna run over here. When I do, shoot the orb and drop it down, okay? It's not that hard. Alright, this is the 4th time. We've been doing this for 3 hours, and I just want to get the fuck off, okay? So come on, and don't leave. You better not be leaving, okay? Alright, let's run it. Let's go. Let's go. Alright, DPS team, go in. I got the gaze. I got the gaze. Come on, guys, go in. Alright, guys. They're in me. I mean, they're on me, man. Fuck! I can't do this anymore. I gotta go outside.
Got my keys and my clothes with your girl coming home cause it's cold now and I'm locked out. Oh hell, too real. Waiting outside in my good heels. I forgot my keys and my clothes with your girl coming home cause it's cold now and I'm locked out.
Say what I'm gon' do, what I'm supposed to say. You gon' get me killed, I'ma catch a fade. She'll be home soon, yeah, she'll be on the way. I just hit the one, shit, I'm in the Palisades. You gon' have to pull up the fire escape. Open up the window, get your little things, get your little keys, get your little rings. Just be in the window before she see your face.
With the final shape coming out on June 4th, being Destiny's 2 last major DLC before Destiny 3, I decided that as a Destiny 1 fanboy, that I should take the time to really see what is going on in Destiny 2. Now, of course, with this being said, this wasn't no easy task, and voluntarily succumbing to the average Destiny player experience
Let's start by getting some sunlight in here. Okay, oh, sorry, okay, we'll
was not a force to be reckoned with. Now, I'd like to mention that I'm not completely new. Clickbait! Clickbait! I actually did play the game upon launch, and I actually did experience the Red War campaign, but I eventually stopped playing because I was not about to join the Destiny grind after already partaking in Division 1 and Destiny 2 grind, so I didn't play past that. Also, at that time, I believe the game was somewhere around like 2 million terabytes, so I deleted it pretty fast. So, with all being said, sit back, grab a beer, and also a crying towel as I take you on the journey of my 2024 Destiny 2 new player experience. Right off the bat, the first thing I did was use my only made character, which was my Warlock that I actually made a few years ago when trying to get back into Destiny 2, but I kept falling asleep while playing Beyond the Light. Upon clicking on my character, I was level 1600 and immediately was sent into the chaos of the Director. Here is where my first challenge was visible. Upon starting a quest and opening the Director, it almost feels like someone threw a flashbang at me. There were so many planets and different random quest symbols on each planet that when going in my quest tab, not only is there like 6 different categories for quests, but each category subjects you to about like 5 or 6 different pages of quests, and immediately I felt over encumbered and overwhelmed. Another thing to mention is there are 2 different pages to your character screen and also your quest and direction screen, so you have to completely memorize which screen leads to what. Now, here's where I wanted to rewind, as I wanted to see genuinely what starting out looks like for a fresh new player, and it honestly wasn't this bad, so I have no idea where the fuck I got all 800 of those quests on my old character, which I played for maybe an hour tops. Around this time, I got done filming most of the footage for this video, so I wanted to make a new character and see what the intro is because of a weird faint memory I had of it. Upon starting a new character, you were thrown into the Light questline, which, if this looks familiar to you, it is. They literally, instead of making something new, inserted the intro to Destiny 1 and considered the Guardian you make here as a completely different Guardian from your one in Destiny 1. The only difference is, instead of finding the ship, you immediately run into another Guardian by the name of Sean Hall, who tells you need to find his fire team. The next mission you run into is getting on a pike and driving across the moth yards and going to the relay tower where you first find the Hive in Destiny 1. You find his friend who gets shit on by a Hive wizard, and then he tells you that his friend that he went to go find is also dead, and that it was too late. You go back to his camp, listen to him yap for a second, then attune to his ship, and this is where the game actually lets you start out. From here, you can choose to do more missions in the Cosmodrome as the tutorial, or you can go back to the tower where you can start playing the actual bulk of the game. So, This wasn't surprising to me, as I've already played through this since at the time I made my new Warlock, which, you guessed it, Destiny 2 already vaulted the Red War and 3 different DLCs such as Osiris, Warmind, and Forsaken, which to me, and definitely many other Destiny players, was not only a huge slap in the face, but also a very controversial move, as a lot of people paid for those DLCs and campaigns just to get it taken from right under them. And a little fraction of me can understand that for players who play the game constantly, it's probably annoying to have space taken up from campaigns that you just aren't going to touch anymore. But on the other hand, how possibly hard is it to just take notes from the Call of Duty, the dickheads you guys decide to throw in with, and make it so that players can decide if they want to download those campaigns and DLCs if they wanted to or not. So, on the note of not being able to trace my steps of the DLCs, not only did I not have the ability to experience the Red War again, and I've also never touched or played any of the early few DLCs except for the fact that Destiny allows you to play a summarized version of Cade's death, and Forsaken as part of their timeline. The Destiny timeline is a feature that allows new players and old to refamiliarize and catch up with what happened in the last few campaigns of the story before preparing for the ultimate final shape ending. While sitting there with my friends, figuring out what the fuck to even do, as the game gave me no general direction, I figure I might as well try to play through all the available campaigns and see what I missed. For, with all being said, I went head on into the first DLC that is playable, Shadowkeep.
Paul 11, this is Houston. Do you read over? This is Houston. Radio check. Please respond.
Moon's haunted.
Upon traveling back to the moon and talking to Eris Morn, she immediately tells you that there's a weird high resurgence coming from the other side of the moon, and she wants you to go check it out. Upon driving to the other side of the moon, you immediately realize that they did jack shit to even make the moon remotely fresh, and it's literally just the same as Destiny 1's moon base. This is where I wondered, how the fuck did Red War get vaulted, but not this shit? Upon reaching the other side of the moon, you immediately encounter a giant red castle looking building, where your first mission is to kill a nightmare enemies and a Tarek's a scared again, and shittier since they are a nightmare version of those enemies. Immediately after you report to Eris with your findings, you are right away sent to do one of these 4 options. Can you guess it? A. Nothing. B. Nothing but kinda something. C. A very cool and well thought out mission. Or D. Uninstall Destiny 2 and go outside. If you guessed B, you are very correct. The next step quest is to literally do public events and patrols on the moon as means to progress your quest, which is so incredibly lazy of a quest design, I can't even begin to explain my distaste. Now, part of it makes sense as to, on the developer standpoint, make that decision as it allows players to explore your terrain and get comfy with it, but if that's the case, why just not make more missions on the moon but scatter them around instead of forcing players to literally farm the same 3 locations? The whole idea of this DLC is while you're doing this quest steps, you will be given tiny quests that all end in essence that once completed grant you a different armor set. The goal is that you'll work all DLC for this armor set, which grants you the ability to go inside the pyramid that Eris Morn discovers under the moon. After finishing this step, you will be tossed into your next mission, which has you investigate the Scarlet Keep, which is the giant red tower that you see behind the giant red castle. This mission acts like a strike. The only difference is the entire time it's the equivalent of a strike with no loot, to the point where it's a similar experience to going to a McDonald's and asking for a cheeseburger with nothing in it but just the buns.
What can I get started for you?
Yeah, could I just get a plain hamburger, please? Thank you. Have a good one. Oh man, I am so excited for this burger. What the fuck is this? What the fuck?! The end of this mission has you ride on God's slowest elevator, because we didn't have enough of these in Halo, and eventually at the top you fight a random wizard that is the daughter of Crota. Hell yeah. Here you find a tablet off of the wizard, and this is where Eris gets the information that you need to go to something called the Cryptolith. But hold up, Before you can even get to it, you have to do some more public events and bounties real quick, then you can launch into the mission. The next mission you have takes place in a place called the Catacombs, which is where you will descend into to find a cryptoglyph. This mission is more aesthetically pleasing, but the fighting is nothing but normal. Eventually you hit a point where everything is dark and you are tasked with standing on these green plates and fighting enemies very similar to the end of the Crota raid, which I thought was kind of a cool touch, and then you find the cryptoglyph. Erismorn doesn't respond to you anymore, so you're left with one option left.
Run.
After escaping, you return to Erismorn, which she gives you a pair of Tims, and she sends you back to doing even more bounties and public events. And after your third set of grinding, you will have all the gear to proceed to the final mission. The Dreambane set, which is the set you obtain after completing all the Essence quests, is a weird mix of an astronaut suit and a samurai looking gear, so I think it's kinda cool. You and your fire team will be sent into the depths of the Scarlet Keep, which then has you find a pyramid and float into it. And here, the entire time, you'll be fighting 3 different Taken bosses, which are all bosses that you have countered in previous campaigns, but this time they laugh at you. Immediately after you kill all 3 bosses, you run into the light, and immediately are introduced to the final cutscene. Now, I'd like to rate Shadowkeep in whole as a 3 out of 10 DLC. It had some cool visuals every now and then, but the amount of times you have to stop doing a mission and run around aimlessly in the open areas for almost up to an hour was just not justifiable as good gameplay. I think the idea of having an enemy force that can manipulate ghosts, create nightmare versions of enemies is a very cool idea. I just get the feeling they didn't really care much about this DLC, and 2, didn't do as much as they could have done with the new faction and the whole idea of nightmares. On another note, I do feel as if having the hide this time be painted with a nice red color was actually not too bad of a look. I just think it unfortunately plays into the issue of just using the same enemies for DLCs, but just switching up their models, which I think is a sort of lazy development. And with the Scarlet Keep supposedly being the most important part of this DLC, if I remember correctly, you only step in it twice in this DLC, and the second time you do, you are barely in it as you are inside the pyramid anyways. Up next, we have Beyond Light.
The darkness is mine!
And while I want to make it clear now, I'm not trying to consistently hate on Destiny 2, or just the game in general. I just have a decent distaste for these first couple of DLCs. Beyond Light for myself is personally, as it is, the only campaign of the story I've ever played in a game that made me fall asleep. 3 times trying to play it. Of course, at the time, I was a tired high schooler trying to play it at like 11 p.m. But even then, I don't fall asleep to games this fast in general. I mean, now I know if I need help going to sleep, instead of listening to relaxing rain sounds, I could just play Beyond Light for 10 minutes. Beyond Light starts off with you being called to Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, in order to deal with a new Kel trying to come to power, and just like most starts to DLCs, you go in guns blazing, killing everyone in your path, find the boss, find out the boss is too powerful for you, run away, and then you spend 4 hours of missions preparing to fight the final boss again. This time though, you find out that the boss has a new superpower, Stasis, which is basically Frozone, and in order to be strong enough, you have to wield this power yourself, but wait, this time, this power is from the darkness. Spooky. Beyond Light has you working side by side with a fallen defectant of Aramis, the main antagonist of this DLC, named Varix, who tasked you with creating a resistance against the upcoming Kel. Only issue is, this resistance comprised of literally only you. The second mission has you activating relays while in a huge snowstorm when eventually a floating weird diamond looking shape appears in the sky. Your character ends up following this pyramid, and what do you know, there's a pyramid on this planet as well. No way. Right after discovering this, you get a cutscene and where the extra stranger is all of a sudden back in the game now, and you immediately meet up with her to discuss matters. Here is where your first one of 4 specific missions attuned to the different crux of darkness, in order to try your best to learn stasis. These missions will have you driving all around Europa to specific locations in order to go into a sort of introduction mode for the power, as every time you commune with each respective pyramid, you have to wipe out all the enemies with your ability, but only for a little. This questline, right after the last few couple of missions, does have you go out into the public areas and do specific fillers in between missions, but this time instead of having to do bounties or wait until public events starts, this time the game will have specific events that will start if you kill a certain amount of enemies in the designated area. Then marked enemies will start to appear, and in a firefight kind of way you have to keep killing off the numerous forces that drop in. After this, you head back to attune to your second crux, and then you are sent on your first strike of the DLC, but this time it's called a hunt, because it's different, because it's a hunt now and not a strike. I don't know. This hunt, in my opinion, is actually kind of the most fun mission for this DLC, as it has you descend deeper and deeper into a giant futuristic building that happens to be an exo factory. This mission has all your goodies, such as numerous enemies to fight through, random tripwires that will annihilate you, and this is also where I ran into my first ever encounter of some good old Destiny 2 platforming in a mission. Eventually, you got to the boss fight, which in my opinion is at least a little bit of a switch up, as every time you do a bar of health to the boss still becomes immune, and you have to hunt down to kill numerous floating generator looking things. Now, I wanted to take a pause and say one of the main issues I see with Destiny's whole fighting design is specifically for a boss. It feels as most of the time the ads are stronger than the boss, because I feel as if I can melt a boss, since they felt that if they were to make the boss strong, then they would feed into Destiny's bullet sponge issue, so then they decided to make the boss squishy, which in turn their boss would be weak and useless. So they added immunity in order to draw the boss fight out longer and making it feel like an actual genuine threat. Destiny, when it comes to boss fights, has an issue where I feel as if the boss fights don't really matter, as they are really just giant versions of enemies we already see constantly. And when getting into a boss fight, there's no real actual fight. I feel like I do less than a minute of damage, or I do 5 extra minutes of figuring out how to do damage again, instead of just making a boss fight that forces me to use my brain, maneuver, or take cover if I have to, or give me even a little bit of stress. I don't know. But back to the topic at hand, after killing Praxis, Vakel, you were hunting, you return back to the camp where you meet Daddy Zavala. And he tells you that Aramis has fled to the Cosmodrome in order to hunt for loot from the previous fallen houses in the last game, which, honestly to my surprise, is kinda cool story writing. As first, I thought this was gonna be a lazy filler, which is actually somewhat kinda fun, as you head back to the very first area that you start out in Destiny 1, and you kill random fallen snipers and the ability to get information pads. After getting the required amount, you are led into a lost sector which has you fight your way through a corridor of enemies until eventually you get to the boss arena, which has you fighting Bascus in what seems to be a spider tank factory, which I thought was kind of interesting, seeing the Fallen actually have bases set up in what should be Guardian-owned spaces, but oh well. At this point, it is very apparent that your number one goal of this DLC is to take Aramis down in the means of killing all of her council so that she is weakened, which in my opinion is literally the lore of Far Cry 4 and Far Cry 5, but in a nutshell.
You and I will go scatter your mother's ashes together.
Immediately after taking out Bascus, Varix informs you of Erasmus calling for backup, in which you are sent on an actual strike this time, named the Glassway. This mission, in my opinion, is my favorite mission of this DLC, as what starts out to be this sort of electric river that you have to make your way over, it instantly kind of has you progress through a cool underground ice cave, with a giant Vex structure built under, which reminds me heavily of Skyrim vibes. Upon reaching the portal that the Vex are spawning in from, you encounter a giant Hydra that you must kill, which stops the Vex invasion. Hooray! After you run back to Varix for the 8th time, which he sends you out for your final open area battle, as you are now tasked with protecting a defecting skiff that is in this blue glowing ship. You have to fight off waves of enemies while also disrupting what I assume to be jammers, which in turn, the ship flies off and Varix tells you that the skiff will now become your allies, which doesn't make sense as I'm never going to see these guys again anyways. And here is finally where all your work pays off. You finally go to hunt Aramis for real this time. The final mission starts by having you shoot your way back into the place you went during the first mission of this game, and once you start reaching Aramis, she kindly greets you back to fight her for a bit, and then she freezes you. But then your character goes Goofy Goober mode.
Hey, settle down. Take it easy. What the scallop? I'm a Goofy Goober!
And breaks free using stasis. You say a shitty one-liner after they messed up my drink.
Break here is you.
Mom.
Then immediately pursue her into what, in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful boss fight arenas that I have ever seen. Now, the boss fight is actually not bad. It is completely against what I mentioned about boss fights earlier, and actually lets you kill the boss without having to wait for them to become vulnerable again, and also prevents you from just destroying the boss after a little bit of damage. After clapping Aramis, everyone high fives, Obama is there, and you are sent back to the Exo Stranger where she glazes you and gives you her rifle again, because she totally didn't already do that at the end of Destiny 1.
Take this.
Finally, you roll back up to the pyramid where you did your last 3 crux embracements, and you are immediately teleported inside the pyramid. Here, you walk up a flight of stairs to what seems to be the everlasting dragon from Dark Souls, and you embrace the darkness and finally unlock stasis. The end. So now that Beyond Light is finished, I want to rate this DLC a 5 out of 10. While I had more to do than Shadowkeep, I think the story writing of it seemed very basic, and that there was really any lack of threat very similar to the issue with Shadowkeep. While having the DLC being longer wasn't bad, having 34 quest steps compared to Shadowkeep's 12 was a humongous overshot in my opinion. What I think would have saved this DLC would have been the ability to instead seek out the cruxes while inside of a mission, instead of having to do a kind of unimportant step that makes me feel like the only reason that it's there is so that I can waste 15 minutes driving to the area, shitting on a bunch of already squishy ads just to prove a point. What I did really like is the reduced amount of downtime sections where I had to sit in one area farming enemies instead of actually playing the campaign. The various areas that have you dive into what feel like unique to themselves without feeling like being added as fillers instead of being actually places with purposes to the story itself. Even having that tiny mission where you go to the Cosmodrome, in my opinion, was a good touch, as it made me feel like Aramis' efforts were dire, and you could tell that she is kind of freaking out after losing so much progress that she has to resort to scavenging old fallen houses. And for the few locations there are on the aesthetic field, I really enjoyed actually seeing some of the arenas that they had in store for us, as seeing the Glassway for the first time was very reminiscent of an old underground Black Garden, or feeling close to what the Vaulted Glass parkour feels like. The final boss, in my opinion, was a perfect setup, as you duel against a boss that doesn't interrupt the flow of the fight with any invulnerability at all. Fighting with the open view of the ice world felt very good. We are now coming up on the halfway point of my storyline experience for Destiny 2, so I thought while we are here, we can stop for a second and talk about what Destiny 2 itself brings new to the table. Because honestly, it feels like Bungie really did step their game up and find a way to bring new and fun things to the game instead of making it feel like the shitty sequel to Destiny 1. Starting off with Gambit, introduced all the way back in the Forsaken DLC, with a new character introduced named The Wanderer. Gambit is a PvE/PvP game mode that has 2 teams of 4 Guardians go neck to neck in a race to see who can fill up a bank with Motes of Dark in order to spawn a final boss. Once spawned, the team has to kill this boss before the enemy team can rather kill theirs, or if down in a timely manner, before they can even spawn their boss in the first place. But there's a catch. Periodically, a portal will open up on both teams' world where they can jump through and evade the other team's world in order to sabotage them. Only one teammate is allowed to invade at a time, and if killed with motes, you are prevented from being able to ever deposit them. Killing other players can also slow down their progress when killing a boss. On top of this, NPCs will also try to shut your bank down by shooting it constantly, so each team will need to have one player to defend the bank. Each team will have specific VIP enemies who will spawn all around the map, and upon killed will reward players with the motes that they must cash in. This game mode in whole actually, in my opinion, makes a very fun PvP, while also having a set objective and being able to switch it up. I think this game mode is a good idea and is very similar to Halo 5's Warzone, which has both teams of Spartans fighting both other players and NPCs in order for total map control. Next up are dungeons. Dungeons are what seem to be mixed between missions and raids, as they aren't as difficult as a raid, but they are very, very long and can also be done with up to a team of 3 players. Each dungeon will have different mechanics which require you to progress, and some will have multiple boss encounters that you'll have to fight and treat like raid bosses, while others will only contain one boss, while being littered with tough enemy hordes and a very long parkour section. This is also where exotic missions come in, as they are dungeon levels that at the end reward you with an exotic, while still holding the enemy difficulty of a dungeon, but this time putting you on a timer, so get a watch and a bucket because you are about to start crying.
22 credits!
Yeah! Whisper Catalyst! Whisper of the Warm Schematic! Yeah!
I wanted one of those.
One of the things I like the most about Destiny is its raids, although being difficult to access without having more than 5 friends and also being a huge time sponge for your quote-unquote real life. Dungeons are that easy to start up good mediation where you actually have the ability to indulge in a well thought out mission with actually somewhat fun and interesting design. Being able to face different challenges while being thrown into different puzzles and environments create for a good session of sitting down with the boys and cranking out a dungeon and hope for good loot at the end of it. Aesthetically wise, I wouldn't mind if this is how Destiny did their DLC mission, as I would be content if whenever they made a DLC, they just threw in 5 dungeons and called it good. For example, the dungeon I did had to utilize dark and light areas, as killing specific knights in the dark will drop dark orbs, while killing knights while standing in the light drop light orbs. Once collecting these, you'll get a ball of light or dark, which allows you to deposit them into these cauldrons, which basically allow you to get to the next section, make the boss vulnerable, or allow you to even enter the boss fight in a later section. This dungeon had a room that took us forever to figure out, which requires to gather either light or dark, which once deposited flips the room in whichever direction you choose. In order to progress, you have to flip to every side of the room in order to create this cube, which spawns in the boss that my team melted so fast I didn't even get to see him. Nice. On the topic of raids, Destiny 2 for its Season of the Wish had something called the Pantheon, which is basically a superset of different raid bosses all collabed together. Now, at this rate, they should have already called this Season of the Crying, as I was only able to really only beat one Pantheon, and in all honesty, I got carried on a backpack. I was indeed the blueberry that said, I can take ad clear. Each different week, a new Pantheon would be added with 1 or 2 more bosses being added to the mix, having you not only fund a crew to go through the exact same ones you just did the week prior, but also being able to do more on top of that. Talk about pain. Now, when it comes to what Destiny would be doing in between the time of each DLC being released, they took the route of adding seasonal quests and telling mini-stories with each season that they put out. The season that was active right before the final shape was the Season of the Wish, which I have no idea what happens in it because it had 55 quest steps and I was not interested, so I ignored it. But what I didn't ignore might have been my favorite new game mode that Destiny has added yet, and this mode is named Onslaught. Onslaught, in my opinion, is a very reminiscent of Halo's Firefight mode that had players fighting against waves of increasing difficulties to see how long they survive. Onslaught has your firefight team against up to 50 waves of enemies while you are tasked with protecting a generator named Ada. Ada will take damage over time, and it is your responsibility to take energy balls that are dropped from enemies and throw them into Ada to repair her. Each 5 waves, you will be subjected to a hallway where you have to take a spark and run it into light at the end of the hallway to kill a mini-boss in order to move on. And at the 10th wave, you'll be sent into an arena where you have to kill an actual boss. Most of the time, just a big version of the classic enemies you see. Around Ada, you can buy multiple different versions of defenses in order to help you keep enemies back, such as clones, who will take aggro of enemies, tripwires to buy you some time, and turrets that will help you melt enemies as you go along. Throughout the different enemies, will also be given different chances to make life harder, with certain events such as skybombers that will be spawned in and force you and your fire team to travel away from Ada just to go deal with them, while other enemies like tormentors will be spawned in to raise hell for your fire team. After passing round 30, the stakes will be raised, with respawn rules being in place, making it so if your team gets wiped, that's game for you, with finally round 50 being your final boss fight and your handsome reward. Onslaught played a part in Shaxx's new social area named the Hall of Champions, where you can get your hand on this season's big weapons such as the Brave Arsenal, which are, from what I can gather, fan favorite weapons brought back with different skins and cool looking bright versions of themselves with new traits and perk pools, allowing players to be able to mix things up with their specific weapons. On top of the collection, the entire Brave Arsenal you'll be rewarded with unlocking the Super Black shader being behind Lord Shaxx that allows for you to be super black. Hell yeah. So, with having what is new to Destiny 2 covered, let's go back to discussing the main DLCs for Destiny 2. Next up after all the chaos is Witch Queen, which, before I say more, I fucking loved this DLC, and I wanted to make this clear because I shitted on the last DLCs pretty hard, so I want to at least instill some hope in the viewer, but this DLC by far is the best one, and it was so much fun to play. Witch Queen has you return to Mars, where Ikora and Eris Morn meet up to talk about some mysterious situation, when suddenly a Cabal ship holding what seems to be a barrel flies over the camp. The group panics just to find out that the cannon that they are building isn't meant for them. Then, out of nowhere, a giant hive ship that was once invisible reveals itself, and Eris responds with one word: Savathun. Now, to me, this absolutely meant nothing, as I didn't know who that was, but I'm assuming that Savathun was a character previously talked about in the Destiny community, and upon doing some research, it turned out she is a hive god and is a sister of Oryx, which you fight at the end of Destiny 1, so this should be exciting then. The first mission has you proceed across Mars' landscape in order to intercept the Cabal, in what has you running past temporal lights that reflects Mars in the Golden Age, showing crops that once proved how well off humanity was on their interplanetary adventures, which I thought was really cool, and is alluded to the fact that due to Mars' activity with this temporal stuff, that Savathun is most likely interested or behind it. Past the farms, you meet up with the Cabal and fight past the defensive enemies when your ghost gets the bright idea of commandeering the giant cannon they are building. After descending through more and more of the Cabal base, you are tasked with fixing the cannon with giant wrenches, activating its generators, and fighting your way through the control room, where you finally get the access codes to prep the cannon for launch. Here, you finally make your way to its loading chamber, and you get sent flying into the hive ship. Right as you land on the outer deck, you are greeted with a quiet sight of dead Cabal everywhere and what seems to be void burns all over the ground. To your ghost's knowledge, you start to speculate that another garden may already be on the ship, causing even more confusion around the characters. You and your ghost quietly start to sneak through the random hallways and stairs of the ship when you finally run into your first patrol of Hive. Upon killing them, what seems to be an electric butterfly that chases you and explodes. It turns out to be a moth containing void light, which panics your ghost for a moment. Just before more can be said, you are locked into a combat situation. Afterwards, you are met with a very cool looking castle-esque parkour section and tasked with traversing the outer parts of the ship while fighting a few Hive in your path when you finally emerge into a very open but pretty area with what seems to be a portal in the middle. Here, a gold Hive knight spawns, which upon fighting and killing, your ghost is sent into complete utter shock, and honestly, so was I. The knight drops a ghost, which not only means that the knight can now revive, but the Hive have access to the light. Oh no. Using the same button as your finisher, you can go up to these ghosts and crush them in your hand. And after fighting a few waves of enemies, you eventually open the portal in the middle, which once going through all the places to teleport, you teleport into a sick ass fucking castle. And here you come face to face with Savathun for the first time, where she immediately moves her way out of the arena and you fight her ads. She comes back only to get instant Nova Bomb and dies, but turns out it was a hallucination. She laughs at you.
There's 3 of them now. Look what you fucking did, man.
Oh my god. They're gonna jerk us off.
Oh no, they're gonna make us come.
And then chucks you back into the sand of Mars. Seems like a lot, right? Well, it is. That was the first mission of this DLC. Insane, right? And it doesn't just stop there, because every single mission of this DLC feels like a 3-person raid, as it takes like 30 minutes just to get through one whole mission, because they just don't stop going with the action. Further on, you wake up back at the Enclave and talk to Ikora, who tells you to investigate the weird relic at the base of the pyramid, which once going down reveals to be a weird spinning pendulum thing that your character walks up to. They scratch your head in confusion, enter the artifact they found the Sabbathum ships into it, and scratch their head even more. One of my biggest issues with this part of the game, unfortunately, is the harder you look at the pyramid, you realize that physically the way they designed is just not possible, as due to the fact it spins and goes through both sides on the same swing, that once the object gets through the first hole, the pyramid would rotate before it could even get through the second one. So in reality, the bell would end up just hitting the second part of the pyramid. Checkmate, liberals. The pyramid acts as a way for players to be able to forge new or already owned weapons into newer and cooler version weapons of themselves, while also being able to use the forge as a way to pinpoint what perks people prefer in the weapons or not. This is also how you use the catalyst on specific weapons and gain skins from extracting patterns from multiple different weapons. Continuing on to the next mission, you are sent back to the throne world, where you simply just told to fuck around and find out, as you and your ghost have absolutely no leads, when all of a sudden a random voice comes across the comms communicating with you in hopes to kind of whistle blow. In this event, the mysterious ghost goes silent, leaving it up to your ghost to track the signal and figure out where to go. This wild goose chase has you fighting your way across the castle courtyards, as you eventually get to the point where all of a sudden you come to an opening where the Scorn are fighting the Lucent Hive. This is apparently confusing to your ghosts, but didn't really mean anything to me, as I have no idea the significance of the situation. Here, you must kill numerous gatekeepers in order to close down the gate leading to the outside, where you eventually escape the castle and are finally able to meet up with whoever was contacting you earlier, which, once revealed, turns out to be one of the Hive ghosts that you took pleasure in crushing earlier. Next mission, named the Ghost, took my friend and I 45 minutes to complete, as at the beginning we thought it would be a good idea to do these missions on legendary difficulty, and while hard isn't really the term at hand, it is very obvious that the devs just made bullet sponging the cool new thing in town, so it took us even longer to beat the mission anyways. This mission has you follow Finch's first tip, as he sends you to journey deep down into the depths of the throne world to investigate Zavu Araf's temple in the throne world. Now, if you're wondering if I just showed a Wikipedia article to explain what I'm talking about, then you were 100% correct, because as I'm watching back the footage and writing a script, I have no idea what's going on. So if you are also confused, let me try to articulate as best as I can on what is happening, because I am also so far lost. So, starting off, apparently, now that we have found out the Hive have a light and that the Traveler has turned its back on us, we also know that apparently at some point, Savathun snuck into the tower and pretended to be Osiris, so that she could learn as much as she could about the light in order to learn how to steal it for herself. So when we went back to the ship, we also grabbed a relic of darkness that, once activated on the pyramid, we gained the ability of deep sight, which helps us look back on the past. So in the attempt to get more deep sight, we are sent towards Savathun's sister temples, which in order to recover Segura in hopes to trigger more deep sight, which will soon become a reoccurring plot point. So back to the topic at hand, we start the mission off by taking an alternate route into the dark cave that starts to reveal more and more of a hidden ruins under the throne room. After third partying some Hive and Scorn, we are subjected to some gnarly parkour that starts off with everything being dark, and in order to figure out where to go, you must shoot these orange bubble looking things which uncover lights. After scaling through the depths of the cave, you'll emerge into a bright open area where you run into some very unique variants of the spider tank. Now, I have no idea if this was in the game before, but this is the first time I'm ever seeing this, and honestly, it's actually a pretty cool change to see. Instead of the Scorn tank having a barrel like the normal versions, instead, this one consists of an almost sack-like looking turret that shoots tracking missiles instead of straight shot shells. After defeating the tank, you progress more through the ruins, where you are tasked with destroying 2 different crystals guarded by a bunch of Scorn, in order to open up a well that drops down to where Segura's shell is. After clearing the area and descending down the well, you are met with another section where, in order to clean the second half of the well, you have to travel to numerous different sections of the cave and destroy the crystals and their Scorn Scorn Guardian. After doing all this, you can now finally jump down the second hole where you encounter your boss fight. This boss fight, in my opinion, is actually really cool, as it requires you to be genuinely good, as in order to do damage to the boss, each third is protected by a specific crystal, which is guarded by that crystal's scored captain. After shooting a crystal, the boss will be vulnerable for about a third of its health before you have to track down the next crystal. This boss, instead of shooting at you, chases you around fanatically with a lantern, and rather hits you or denies access to the area by lighting the ground on fire. After defeating the boss, you are finally rewarded with Segura's shell and a Klondike bar. After retrieving Segura's shell, you are now granted with another little bit of deep sight that reveals the witness. Spooky. The next mission is easily one of the most simplistic missions, as this time, and interestingly enough, Erismord and Ikora send you back to Europa in order for you to commune with the dark statue inside the pyramid and hope to be granted even more deep sight. This mission starts off with you immediately fighting a Cabal tank and entering the gravity lift to the pyramid. Here, you will fight your way deep into the pyramid against hordes of now Cabal, which in my opinion are my favorite enemies to fight in this game, as they're the most diverse and on an NPC scale most interesting faction to go against, as I feel like there is a genuine challenge to fight them instead of just aiming at a horde of enemies when they group up and shooting in their general direction. Once making your way to the final boss, you and your buddies in a raid-like manner must coordinate in order to disable multiple different jammers while dodging waves of gunfire in order to drop the boss's shield. Once doing this enough and killing the boss, you are finally able to commune with the dark statue, which upon doing so, nothing happens. Characters are hopeful that the payoff will actually mean something. Now, around this point, I must have lost the footage of this section because it just wasn't present when I was watching the footage back, but immediately after traveling to Europa, you head back to Savathun's throne world, where you, Ikora, informs you of a place called the Altar of Reflection, where your guardian brings Segura's shell to the altar, which in turn fully uncovers the Witch Queen's memories, and this is where you learn that the Witness is the one controlling all the pyramid ships. So now I'm just going to show this part of the Wikipedia article because apparently I somehow lost the footage of what my favorite part of this quest line was, and also what is like a huge plot point, but this is the Temple of Sethona. Look at this shit. This is so sick looking. This is like seeing the Firekeep in Dark Souls 2 for the first time. We're coming across Demon Ruins for the first time in Dark Souls 1. Now I can't quite remember what happens during this mission, but what I do remember is the fact that you are tasked with having to progress across the rocks over the lake in order to reach the temple. And the point of getting to this temple is to find a worm familiar. This worm is apparently important to the story, as this is the worm that caused Savathun and her siblings to go to the sea where they ran into the worm gods, which apparently the worm gods made a deal with them, that if they were to be affected by the worm larva, that they would feed through death and conquest forever, in turn giving them great powers, turning them into gods and promising them protection from a prophesized cataclysm that would wipe a lot of their species off their current planet. Damn. Okay, so pit stop, we just went into full Halo flood moment, but instead the floods are gods and the people they infect also turn into gods, I guess. Not only this, but if I knew this was what created the hive the entire time, I would have appreciated them as a faction way more. So Destiny, holy shit, where the fuck was this writing all the entire time? How did you guys get away with Beyond the Light and Shadowkeep, but you guys absolutely cooked with this? Insane. Moving on from my lore rant, the Guardians try to take this worm familiar back to the Altar of Reflection, but is rejected as the portal won't open. So, out of nowhere, you were sent back to Ikora, which her and Daddy Zavala are fighting, and then she dips, and now Zavala is leading the operation. Due to the fact that you can't bring the worm to the altar, you instead bring the worm back to the relic in the pyramid, which then you are shown a memory of Savathun, taking the worm familiar to the worm gods, as the traveler was actually preparing to give the Krill, who are the precursors of the Hive, the light, and grant them a golden age, such as how the Iliski, aka the Fallen, and the humans were also granted. In the meantime, Eris now informs you of a lead which has you travel back to Savathun's fortress, where you now have to explore a different wing of the palace in order to seize a crystal that apparently Queen Mauve used in order to imprison Savathun, which, by the way, during all of these campaigns, they bring up Marasov like 100 times, but they barely even show her. So at this point, I recognize she's important, but I have no idea who she is, and I'm assuming she's the same lady as the one that almost whoops your ass in the first game. I want to stop here and also mention how much I want to appreciate the fact that the developers for this DLC don't just stop creating new experience for you, and that almost no mission for this quest is quite the same. Recovering the shard allows for the Guardian to re-enter the altar again, which, upon placing the Worm Familiar on the altar, you are granted with the most important memory yet. Now, I realize at this point I haven't really discussed the altar, so let's talk about it really quick. The altar is this bright and clean, dreamy-like place that has you solve a rune puzzle every time you want to get into the altar, which each different time you wish to enter the puzzle gets more and more complex, with starting out with only being matching the runes on the single wall, to having to run around the entire area and shoot the correct order of symbols on these 4 circular structures. I actually like the pace of this, even though I'm not a crazy fan of puzzles being placed in the middle of action-packed stories. Having this as an actual time to fire up my brain signals was kind of nice, honestly. Upon bringing the Worm Familiar to the altar, you are shown Savathun's final memory. As it is revealed that Savathun actually died outside of the last city, and that upon her death, the Traveler willingly resurrected her with a ghost. Then, out of nowhere, jump scare Savathun appears, thanking us for the memories. Apparently, we reminded Savathun of why she was doing what she was doing, and now she can continue her plan. After this, you're sent back to the tower and head into a room which I have never seen before, and here's where your final journey initiates. Ikora announces that Savathun has already begun to do a ritual in order to pull the Traveler away from the last city and for herself. You fly back to the Throne Palace and you fight your way through the courtyards. Ikora nukes an ogre in front of you, and you start to ascend through the palace, and you get to a stupid fucking portal maze, where you have to figure out which portal is the right one, and if you get the wrong one, she sends you all the way back down and laughs at you.
Shut the fuck
Upon taking a few lift elevators and reaching the top, here is where you finally encounter Savathun. Savathun at this point has 2 boss fights, which is just fucking nuts. First off, the encounter has you fighting her at the edge of her palace with a lake behind her and a Traveler over your head. Periodically, Savathun, when her health is lowered, will leave the fight and you must extinguish her light bearers until she comes back. Once finishing her, you go to crush her ghost, but instead end up trapped by a spell. Savathun revives and flies away, a bridge Houdini's out of nowhere, and you must now cross over the vast lake. Under the Traveler's light, and meet Savathun in her final stand. For majority of the boss fight, Savathun will remain immune, with the game allowing you to damage her a little at the start. It becomes apparent that she is too strong and that your classic shooting isn't going to be enough this time. Before you cross the bridge, Savathun also makes a comment that I feel is very game recognizing game.
Fight, run, fight, run. The pattern is always the same for you. Don't you ever get tired of it? Don't you escape?
Every time Savathun goes immune, you must hunt down 3 wizards hidden around the boss fight and kill them in order to open a blue light in the middle of the arena that, once interacting with, takes you to a green and dim, dreamy place where you must disrupt the ritual happening in which the Hive are attempting to cover the Traveler in what seems to be massive amounts of web. In the circular area are multiple portals that each take you to every respective tower, in which you must figure out how to climb, then kill the wizard at the top that is weaving. You are allowed to do 2 each before you are teleported back, and for a brief period of time allowed to do damage to Savathun. Then this process is repeated. Every time you step back into this ritual blocking, Savathun is slowly more and more showing the truth of what actually did happen to her. So in turn, her weakness isn't her physical battles, but what she is mentally is carrying. Upon defeating Savathun, she is dropped to the ground in a weakened state, with her final words being,
The witness is coming. The game is yours to play now. Yours to win or lose. Just don't say I didn't warn you.
Honestly, what a cool way to go. And with all being said, this is our wrap for the Witch Queen, which finally, the portion of the script took me almost 3 on and off days to write, just because it took almost 6 pages of the script. Witch Queen is a solid a million out of 10. Now, I know most Destiny players glaze the fuck out of Witch Queen, but honestly, Bungie and Destiny deserve it because this brought me back to why I love Destiny and Bungie's story writing in the first place. I mean, you look back on Beyond Light and Shadowkeep and think, wow, the same guys who illustrated the Fall of Reach are the same people who made this shit. And it's also got me wondering, were you guys fucking drunk and just happened to have a really good AA meeting when it came to write this story? The story not only made me appreciate Destiny 2 more, but also a faction that previously I saw as just a mindless faction into an actual threat. One that made me care even if I was clueless about any of its lore before. I'd like to tie in the Witch Queen storytelling with one such as the Flood for Halo, as both are parasitic driven factions that at the base level are mindless hordes of enemies willing to do anything to see your demise, while being solely controlled by a singular voice and a more sinister leader. I like how in a way the Witch Queen made the Hive almost scarier than the Flood, as while the Flood just want to constantly consume everything they can for a never-ending hunger, but the Hive want to kill everything they can just for the lust of blood. And what I also enjoy about the Hive is that they were once just like humans, a normal species that lived in peace before without a choice succumbing to being an evil force in hopes to avoid extinctions. This is the type of writing that makes me want to play a whole game with this type of storytelling. And when it comes down to the gameplay aspect of the Witch Queen, everything I bitched about in the past was nowhere present, leaving me so confused on how the tone switch was so heavy, as previous campaigns had me do shit such as sit in a dumb open area that I didn't even care about and kill things. Instead, every mission I did had a specific reason behind it, with each not only being important but always being different than each other, with the exception of the fact that when you are going to the altar reflection, they don't ever just spawn you near the portal, but they force you to run your ass back all the way through the temple in order to reach it, which is especially annoying when the second or third time you do it, the portal is deactivated. Talk about a waste of time. One of my favorite missions I unfortunately lost the footage for was the one where you descend into Oryx's temple. It was just such a cool place to be, and the entire time I enjoyed being there as it was just so fascinating of an area to be in. I really felt as the weight of chasing ghosts while also being in a dire situation, requiring to go on vast journeys just to get to where I need to be. And with this being said, honestly, the scenery to which the Witch Queen was just chef's kiss. Like, with seeing the Throne Palace for the first time, or the Traveler hovering right over you was just insane stuff. Similar to the sights of seeing super carriers hovering over New Alexandria on Reach, it felt as if the world was watching. And for our final campaign on this journey, I present to you Lightfall.
Is this all the Traveler's chosen guardians can muster? You cannot escape oblivion. Embrace the end.
Lightfall starts out with you abruptly boarding a Cabal ship in the literal middle space Master Chief style, and task you with destroying the Cabal's engine reactors in order to stop the ship from its invasion of Neo-Numa, a hidden secret city that resides on the surface of Neptune, which is also another new planet to Destiny. The reasons these ships are heading there is so that they can gain control of something called the Veil, which is not only important to the Witness, but is also crucial to the citizens of Neo-Numa, but we will discuss this later. Once aboard the ship, you are contacted by Osiris, who is apparently also somewhere randomly hidden on the ship, as he addresses you as another stowaway. Upon destroying the ship's generators in the Halo Pillar of Autumn style, you must dodge through different groups of enemies and ship hallways in order to get to some escape pods on the ship and drop into Neptune. Sound familiar? At some point during your journey, you get to this section where you have to leave the ship and jump over space rocks in order to get to the other side of the ship. This scene is really cool as you see the outside of the planet from space while also watching other ships zoom in heading towards the planet. Once reaching the drop pod, you are witness to the greatest cutscene of all time. Then you get in yourself and launch towards Neptune. Once landing, you are forced to roam the quiet and desolate streets of Neo-Numa and fight enemy patrols while progressing towards Osiris's pod as he is stuck in his. Sound familiar?
My hatch won't open. How about yours?
Works great.
While in the streets, you are contacted by a new voice questioning who you are, and upon telling them that you are also fighting Cabal and that you are a guardian of the last city, the younger one seems shocked and calls you a light bearer, which is cool in my opinion, as it brings a fresh and what I think is a cooler name to the classic guardian name. They tell you that they will meet up with you once they get out of a pinch. Once getting near Osiris drop pod, your ghost picks up a signal of an anomaly, which once embracing, gives you the 5th new power of darkness, Strand. Strand starts out to be really fun as it allows you to swing around and turn into Curious George. Now of course this is super sick, but later I have some beef out I'll soon explain. Using Strand, you must clear the area of Cabal, which grants you this cutscene. Here, you free Osiris, and you get introduced to Nimbus and his mentor, Rohan, who roll in Green Goblin style on hoverboards and take out the Cabal surrounding Osiris. They introduce themselves and decide to meet at the Watchtower, which will be your safe area for this planet. In the same cutscene, we are introduced to our main villain, Callus, and his affair with the Witness, as they discuss their mission to secure the Veil. Once reaching the Watchtower, it becomes very clear real fast that this may be one of the worst safe areas of all time. If you have even remotely of a friend that likes fucking with you, staying in a cutscene with Nimbus has maybe a 5-second timer before your friends decide to launch you 20 nautical miles off the tower. The next mission has you stuck outside a Pyramid Tech Force barrier, which requires you to fight off enemy waves surrounding it in order to get your hands on Shadow Legion keycards in order to bring it down. On the other side of this barrier is the way to the Veil, which in turn has you and your fire team trying your best to prevent the Shadow Legion from reaching it. Once reaching the other side, you appear at a courtyard that is being constantly combed with a shockwave. Your ghost exclaims that your light is being suppressed and he doesn't know why. Turns out, the Shadow Legions have EMPs, but for light, which they can place around the city blocks, making it harder for you to fight, which will become a theme for a while for this DLC. This is also the point where apparently my luck is so damn bad that I die at this point just because it's funny.
Okay, what?
Oh my god.
After this encounter, you will be met with your cutscene for this mission. Here, it is revealed that the Shadow Legion has already got the Veil, and then out of nowhere your ghost gets possessed. The Witness is talking to Callus through your ghost. Now, I'm gonna take a stopping point and just allow John to explain what's happening in the story real quick, if you're confused.
Okay, John, can you wrap me up on what happened in that mission? Like, what were all the plot points of that mission?
So, under Neo Munio, there's a thing called the Veil, and it's like connected to the Traveler somehow causally through like an interdimensional mumbo jumbo space. And the Witness needs to, I guess, destroy the Veil so that he can like kind of access the Traveler or whatever.
Next up, you'll be tasked with storming Callus's stronghold, which what lies inside is the radial mass that you must destroy. The radial mass is a pyramid artifact built by the Witness that allows for a faster than light connection between darkness directly to the Traveler. Thanks, Google. Beyond fighting your way through the fortress's guards and fantastic parkour sections, here's where you'll also have your first fight with a Tormentor, which honestly serves as a pretty fun mini-boss in between missions. You'll be met with the radial mass in a place called the Colosseum after delivering Dark Resonance.
Oh my fucking god.
Oh no shit.
And sitting in yellow circles, the radial mass will eventually be surrounded by another barrier. Taken enemies will also be spawned in the chaos, which then randomly another Strand anomaly appear, and for your second time you will be able to wield Strand and clear the room with your newfound power. Out of nowhere, a new Taken boss will be spawned, which will be immune, and you cannot do any damage to it. Then, you get monologued by Callus, and a timer with 1.5 minutes telling that darkness and roaches and you must run. Around this time, out of nowhere, straight up Halo 3 Orbital style, a friendly ship shows up and takes the aggro for you, shooting everything it can. Straight up Halo Warthog Run style, you must get on your Sparrow and drive your way out of the fortress before the darkness collapses on you. following mission has you infiltrate a Neonuma power station named the Cloud Arc. This is important because apparently all the citizens of Neonuma have linked their consciousness to said Cloud Arc, so this means that if the Cloud Arc was to ever be taken over, then everything would possibly die, or become mind controlled. So of course, once you get there, not only is there literally no protection in this Cloud Arc, but the Vex are literally already there, and able to spawn in no problem. Sick job, Neonuma. This is the equivalent of someone coming to rob a bank, but the vault is just a table in the middle of the lobby with all the cash on it. While fighting your way deeper into the facility, your main objective will be to stop the Vex from siphoning power from the Cloud Arc by killing the remaining enemies in the area, while also destroying these weird Minecraft looking things. Upon doing this, your ghost goes,
It was a little too easy.
Which of course has Nimbus freaking out with news that the Shadow Legion has also pulled up to the Cloud Arc, and that they have bombs set up all over what seems to be the main reactor to it. Once reaching the room, you see bombs everywhere, which they then encounter a double Tormentor fight, which is honestly kinda cool. I don't know, I like double boss fights, except for this shit. You again escape from the facility, bombs blow up behind you since you're cool like that, and you get pushed out to the outer platform and everyone high fives. The following mission is pretty much considered a training mission, as it has you progress through waves of Vex towards a place called the Training Yards, which is just a giant ass parkour section that I was so ass at that I almost turned into an IGN reporter. Not only of this, but at the beginning of the mission, the initial strand point is located on top of the highest fucking point, which I could barely reach with my dog shit Warlock glide. At the end of this level, you'll fight a boss, which then, Strand starts to take its toll on you, and doctors have mentioned that using Strand for 5 minutes is the equivalent of smoking 10 packs of Marlboro Blues. After the boss fight, you will emerge victorious, but still without the ability to fully harness Strand. Then, with the Nux cutscene, it shows Osiris pondering why Strand don't work, while Rohan swoops in to give Osiris some dad advice. Then out of nowhere, the Cabal fly over with Radio Mass heading towards the Veil. The next mission, in my opinion, is my favorite mission, and hands down the most fun mission I have played on this game yet out of all of the DLCs. This mission has you start by clearing out tiny patrols of Shadow Legion soldiers, and also a tank that are guarding the various energy draining things. After freeing the area of the pulse and dispatching of the tank, a friendly ship swoops in and drops you a tank named the Drake. This section, literally for the next 10 minutes, has you play through the mission while driving through hordes of Shadow Legion, blowing up everything in your way, and while this is all happening, you have horns playing in the background.
Tank beats ghost. Tank beats hunter. Tank beats everything.
Once reaching your final destination, you run into a clusterfuck of different scenarios with enemy tanks around the radial mass, green strand everywhere, and suppressors being constantly spawned on you. You must battle the odds in order to fight your way through the enemy forces. This mission also allows the fact that since the suppressors were made by the Shadow Legion specifically to stop your guardian from their known powers, Strand isn't known to the Shadow Legion, making it the only power that can destroy the suppressors. After the final boss fight in which we melted so fast he wasn't notable, you finally go to destroy the radial mass, but your guardian ends up too weakened. Inside, Rohan opens the center up in order for you to destroy it, but in your weakened state, you are not able to, so Rohan has no other choice but to Little Big Planet 2 pop. Then, sadness occurs. Proceeding from Rohan's death leads you to a mission where in Kalos' attempt to use the radial mass fails, he instead takes a different approach by attacking the Arc Cloud Net with the Witness's forces of the Taken. Returning to the training grounds has you instead fight already planted Shadow Legion, which once defeating the Tormentor randomly opens up a weird Willy Wonka hole looking thing that you travel down. and upon doing so, you are subjected to what I think is the coolest looking mission this DLC has yet, and honestly, second being the Witch Queen Oryx Temple mission on the discussion of looking cool. This mission has you dive deeper and deeper into the Arc Cloud in order to repel invading Taken forces from being able to control the Arc Net, with having you do certain parkour sections, a little track that you drive your Sparrow on at one point, and with finally the boss fight having you laser beam a Taken Hydra while as core. This mission all in all is pretty fun to play, and with what I imagine it would have been like to be inside a Windows computer at age 7. Your second to last mission I'm not really going to cover, as it just has you do a second training mission for Strand, this time being a section where you're once again fighting a Vex boss. You're able to fully use Strand for real this time, and you are granted a training montage. And here at the end of the road is where your final mission of the DLC, your last hurrah. The final mission kicks off with you taking to the rooftops of Neomnuma in the event that the Shadow Legion have set up AA guns that you must take down. As Keitel, your apparent Cabal homies that I didn't even know exist, doesn't want any more of his or her ships being taken out of the sky. Once finishing the job, you then cross a broken bridge in order to join Keitel's forces in a last stand against the Shadow Legion. This fight drags on for quite a while, but on the upside, Nimbus activates a literal orbital space cannon that you can target designate the overwhelming tanks and enemies that are attacking the Veil. Eventually, after a while, out of nowhere, your mother appears in the sky and absolutely shit on all of Keitel's forces, and also somehow punches a hole straight through your entire defense. So I'm not going to even try and explain that. After this, you must descend deep and deep into the Veil in order to reach the vault before the Emperor does, which, while right outside the wall, Callus is randomly already inside, and once you meet him, this is your final face-off against the Emperor himself. This boss isn't actually as bad, as it doesn't make you wait very often for random invulnerability to go down, and on top of that, it has 2 phases. This boss fight also takes place in a very circular arena with green strand bubbles everywhere that allow for you to swing around the arena, but I didn't use any of these as they were the leading cause of my death most of the times during this fight. This fight is also definitely ripped straight from Robo Patrick boss fight from Battle for Bikini Bottom. When draining his health fully, phase 1 will end, and you'll be drawn into the center of the arena where Callus will pull out 2 swords and charge into the close and personal fight where you have to run around and avoid him. And during this fight, there are also ads on the side sniping you, while Tormentors will make sure that you're always moving. Eventually, Callus is defeated, and you and Nimbus brofist only right before your ghost gets possessed again. And your Guardian does nothing, just to watch the ghost activate the Veil, which shoots directly at whatever bullshit the Witness has set up right outside the Traveler. All hopes is lost, as Keitel mentions we just lost. And your final cutscene in the campaign shows the Witness drawing a triangle on the Traveler, creating the final shape. And that's it. The end. And before I get into my full conclusion for my time playing Destiny 2, I'd like to cover how I felt about Lightfall myself. Well, before playing it most of the time, I got word that a lot of people didn't really like it, and I could see why, as for a Destiny fan, going from Witch Queen to a sort of downgrade such as this could be a devastating way to see how people are going to react to the content that you come out with. And while I don't mean to hold developers at a constant high standard, I personally don't think Lightfall was that bad, as people were saying it really was. This campaign the entire time was pretty much proof that Bungie was returning to their roots of what really made Space War interesting, especially with how they portrayed the Hive in the last one, seeing the quiet, desolate streets of which was one a vibrant and beautiful city of Neomnuma, gave me this big flashback that honestly a lot of this DLC reminded me of a big ton of Halo 3 ODST, which is my favorite game from the Halo series. For example, landing in a drop pod and roaming the empty streets, having to save Osiris immediately in his own drop pod, or fighting in an underground and secluded high-tech structure that is crawling with enemies in order to clear something that is a mystery to you, roaming the rooftops of Neomnuma in order to destroy the AA guns, and defending the Veil against the hordes of the Shadow Legion until they eventually overwhelm you. The characters for this DLC also made it feel like it was fun and interesting campaign, as they also kept to their roots of gameplay, with everything being told by the missions, instead of once again having to roam the free areas. But ironically enough, I actually felt like the developers this time around didn't really add any reason to go to certain areas of the city. For example, the Vex incursion zones. I don't even recall even going to this area unless I had to, which is an issue with Destiny, as due to the fact that the game is always creating new content, it's almost as if there is no reason to ever go back to the old planets and ever explore, which is what I miss about Destiny 1. So much as I feel like a lot of the missions, wherever you went to a new planet, were missions that dealt with sending you around to empty cities, searching for vital things, in the attempt to allow you to also explore the world you are in while actively doing something. When it comes down to what the mission had you doing anyways in the first place, honestly, it was kind of immersion breaking to have me going from duking out for my survival of my life to a fucking training montage. The storytelling of itself wasn't anything special, but at least it felt cohesive and like I was actually doing something, so I wasn't too bothered. And finally, with Callus's fight, I didn't mind it. Still better than Shadowkeep, so that's all that matters, but wasn't anything special like the Witch Queen, or pretty like Aramis and Beyond the Light. With this being said, that was my Destiny 2 2024 new player experience. All in whole, coming back to Destiny 2 wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. With being allowed to play what content was left and honestly feeling that reminiscent vibe of specific Destiny 1's campaigns, it was a nice step back into a world that I left long ago. I do want to say that in terms of world building, they did step their game up with their scenery while not being able to capture the magic of what it felt like seeing the empty Cosmodrome for the first time in Destiny 1. Things like seeing Savathun's throne world for the first time, or seeing the quiet lit up horizon of Neonuma for the first, it still captured that curious awe in me that made me want to genuinely see what Bungie had in store. Gameplay wise, I still hand down to think that Destiny in general has some of the most fun gunplay and satisfying looting systems. With whatever you are doing, something that is relative, the developers never fail in giving you some new and intriguing, while also I do want to say it will probably suck for people who have not been playing for a long time, but it feels as the grind for this game has been tuned down a lot, making it so you don't have to play as long or waste hours of your time, when you have a better chance of getting loot or specific items, even exotics, which even though they took away the rarity feeling to it, if it wasn't for things like raid loot, I wouldn't even know summoned weapons exist in the game, so at least Destiny 2 still has some rarity to it. And speaking of weapons, Destiny still has some of the most diverse, cool looking weapons in the gaming scene today, with also the names of their weapons being something out of a kitchen because they cooked. Like for example, when I'd be doing raids and someone said, yo, pull up the Parasite, I'd be like, what the fuck is that? And then they would say, oh, well you don't want the Parasite, then how about the Apex Predator? Then I was like, damn, okay, well I guess we got Dr. Disrespect in the game. No, I'm kidding, but in all reality, I had a good time playing Destiny 2 and got a lot of my friends to log on and play with me. Thank you to everyone who stuck around to join this video, and also to you, the viewer. If you're still here, thank you so much. Honestly, damn, at this point, I think it's like an hour and 10 minutes, so thank you so much for your time. It is very much appreciated, but also, please like and subscribe. I put a lot of effort into this video, so it'd be nice if you could all join the channel and be around for future and past videos. So, with all being said, thank you so much, and you all have a great day, night, or morning. Bye-bye.